Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I'm going to shorter videos and more of them. I've already discussed this, or will discuss it tomorrow. I'll explain all about that, but I'm going to probably post content on both channels every day, just shorter videos, and see how that works out. But I wanted to talk about the woke culture and the so-called truth community, both in a separate way, but both having, higher and higher levels of suck, right? So the first thing I want to say that I get, comments from time to time. I don't know whether it's just trolls who want to create doubt or people who are just suck or whatever it is. And the comments generally center around how they don't like my celebrity videos or videos that aren't, what they deem about important issues, right? And there's a couple of things that the first part, which is not the most important, is that there's so many people talking the same things, doing the same, there's just a group think in the truth community. Again, I'm not watching these videos, but I'm not watching these YouTubers, but I know this from the past, and I'm sure there's even more now. Truther channels that just say the same thing as other truther channels. They present the same info, they do the same thing, and they have the same takes, and then people leave the same comments, and it's just all the same, right? And I like to think that my channel is different. I don't know. If there are channels like mine, they're probably in some ways copycat channels, and that's okay. Like, I don't mind. If people have, been influenced by my channel in a positive way, you're not ripping anything off or just regurgitating the way I do things and just, that would be bad on lots of levels. But, there's so many people that come from the Alex Jones model of YouTuber, and there's a lot more channels that are, follow one path or another of a certain model. And, if there's a model being created here, if other people embrace some of those principles in their own way, in their own words, with their own style, I think that would be probably a positive thing. But the more important piece to this is people who think that some things are more important and deem celebrity videos and videos about the entertainment world as less so than what they consider to be, important issues, don't get it. And this is what they don't get. And probably many of you don't think about it. And I just thought about it for the first time. I thought about it in different ways, but in a much more clearer way. I've said before that entertainment has far more influence on people than news and news stories and politics and true stuff and all these others. Entertainment and social media stars have far more influence on everyday people. So I've talked about that before. And so that's where all the energy is, right? Not on politics and not on world events. But something deeper that I had a thought about was this. And maybe I've said this before, but not, I didn't conceptualize it like I am now. That your TV shows and your movies, I've talked about this in the past where your stories are important. Like if you go to like a Native American culture, they have storytelling, and Druid culture, ancient, these shamanistic cultures, but any culture, village-based cultures, there's stories, there's fables. In religion, there's these stories. And those stories are important to making who you are internally as a person, right? And so I've talked about that before. The stories are everything, and our stories are movies and TV shows. But on another level, what you see on TV and movies, and now the way TV is binge watch, that changes everything, and the way the internet is and all these things. But if you look at the content that's being produced, the two major elements of it are sex and violence. Now there's various genres, right? There's like sci-fi and drama movies and comedies and action adventure and reality TV, all these different things, right? I can't even think of all the genres of movies and TV shows. But sex and violence is pretty much in every one of them. You see sitcoms where there's physical fights, right? And sex even, more so. So there's a lot of movies where there's violence, horror movies where there's going to be both sex and violence in those. And so, sex a little bit more so. Of course, the porn makes up 1/3 of the internet, right? And people who are, everything you look at, billboards, everywhere you look, there's sexualization of children. sexualization of products, and they want you to associate sex with their product, right? And when you are in a sexual mode, like it's a different sort of a mode, right? When you have sexual arousal, when you have sexual urges, it puts you in a different state of consciousness, right? And it's very powerful, right? Like you think about making decisions, it's like being drunk or maybe even worse. Making decisions when you're sexually aroused. Many bad decisions have been made when people are sexually aroused, right? Like people having unprotected sex with somebody they hate. Like that happens. Maybe alcohol's involved as well, but the sexual arousal, even though they dislike somebody and they impregnate them or they get pregnant by some guy that they don't like, and then they have a lifelong, an 18-year connection or even, lifelong connection with a kid, right? I mean, there's just all these bad decisions that are made when somebody's sexually aroused. And if you get, like an attractive salesperson who is able to, create that kind of energy, they can get you to buy anything, right? Because you're much more, when you're in a sexually aroused mood, yes is an answer that you will give. You'll agree to things. People agree to horrible things because they, of their desire, right? And the powers that be want people to be in a constant state of sexual arousal so that people are easily manipulated. I mean, it's a natural drug of endorphins and dopamine and things like this. And natural urges, a very powerful urge, and it creates, complete distraction for people. And they become pleasure-centered, and they don't ever become like a serious person, right? They just are in this constant state of sexual arousal, and it contributes to drug use. I mean, there's this TED Talk that I guess is gone now, Gary Wilson, the great porn experiment. And he talked about how porn addiction is leading people to other types of addictions. And there's so many people now with sex addiction that it's even outgrowing like alcohol and drug addiction. And they're all like connected, they're tied together. When someone says they're not in the mood for sex, that means they can't go into that state, right? It's an altered state of consciousness. Maybe they have a headache, they feel pain, they're stressed out, whatever it is, right? It's like a sleep state. Your brain go through different states, like active states and, alpha waves and beta waves and these different brains. I just did a thing on how they're able to read people's brains now through EKGs and through AI technology is a thing on the WEF, and they're going to do this in offices and read people's brains and see if they're slacking off and where they're thinking about and all these things, right? And so, this is well known. And so violence, on the other hand, again, violence is very popular. Of course, violence in football, a lot of war movies, and violence in all these movies, superhero movies, a lot of fighting, physical fighting, a lot of murder. And again, here in America, America was the world's military, Europe's military. And, that was a big part of that, creating violence here. People say that the circumcision of men helped, increase men's violent tendencies. That's something that is supposed to contribute to that, right? Bunch of things to do with that. And so sex and violence are a part of our existence, a very animalistic existence, right? A dominant existence. In social media, you see post pictures. In the natural world, you'll see, like it'll be male birds more often than not are the more, beautiful ones because they have to attract the female. But also male animals try to show off their strength, and that has a lot to do with athletic prowess. And you see that a lot in Facebook. And then women trying to look attractive, all these things, right? And, it's constant, right? All these things are a part of it. Like attracting mates is a big part of social media and everything else, right? Sexual partners. And so think about that, like just how much that makes up the entertainment. You see these truthers out there who think the government is responsible for all bad things. Of course, there's my wife and I watched this thing called The Anarchists. This guy, I forget his name already. My wife watches him sometimes he has some kind of a YouTube channel or some sort of, platform. The Dollar Vigilante, I believe he's called. I forget the guy's name. I just saw the thing. We watched a little bit of it. And it was presented on HBO, and they treated these people, at least in the first episode, that's all we watched. They treated these people, these anarchists, they're not violent anarchists. They're people who think that they can go without a government. And they, go down to Mexico, Acapulco, and they have this, this freedom fest or whatever it is. And maybe some of you guys are into that or whatever it is. But their solution sucks. Because their solution is, get rid of governments, but they've made a lot of money. A lot of these people have made money on these events, and they're public speakers. They're people who have a following on social media, and they've made money. And they're not growing food, right? Like, if you're going to get rid of the government, that means you have to go back to a tribal way of doing things. And that means you're going to have a lot less stuff. You're only going to have what's local, and you're going to have to work. You're going to have to do physical work. You have to grow food, and you're going to do it all the time. And you're not going to have the comforts and pleasures that go along with this economy. I mean, it's just that simple. The economy and the government are one thing. The governments are there to protect the haves from the have-nots and to, keep this economic system going, whatever it takes. And the military is a part of that as well. And so, all these people thinking that if you got rid of the government, it would be fine, should look at what the TV shows that are out there. Because if you look at the TV shows, movies, you look at the horror movies, you look at the graphic nature, you look at the vulgar nature, you look at the selfishness, you look at the reality TV shows, this is where people are at. This is what people have accepted as what they want to watch. This is what people want to see. This is what they want to have in their internal world. These are their stories. And whether they were degraded by the powers that be, the deviant people that run the system, sure, that's part of it, but they went along with it. We all did, right? This is what we are. Look at our movies and TV shows. Look at how sucky they are. Look at all the crap that's in there. Look at all the stuff that's deviant and, not from God, that's unnatural. And what you get is people who, like this guy, Dollar Vigilante and his people, and then all these other groups in the truth community, you get people who are really good at telling you the problem. And, it's all the same stuff. Like, we can all kind of tell you what the problem is. All of us, and you can do it too. You can, most people can articulate the problem with the so-called controllers, the people that run the system, the problem with the wealthy elite people, whatever. But the solutions all fail. And the reason the solutions fail, which I've said over and over again, is that there's no solution to this system. There's no way of making this system good. There's no way of making this system divine. There's no way of making this system pure. Because at its base, at its root, is the debt-based economic system and a perversion, a deviance from the natural order of things. And it's an ego-based system, which makes it demonic. The egos are demonic, are devils. Your ego's your devil, your soul's your angel, and there's an inner battle between each person to choose one or the other, and most people just, are mostly sort of straddling the fence between the two, right? But you can pick out a problem, and people are good at that, right? And then pretend you have a solution, but you don't. And then you sell that solution to people because people don't want to hear what I say here all the time. The system can't be saved or fixed. It's working exactly like it's supposed to. And it's taking us in the wrong direction, and we're all 100% addicted to it. And there's no money in that, right? Like, I can't market that and get you to pay a lot of money to hear that because you don't want to. And it's not that, So these truthers come up with these BS solutions, and they make it mostly about the problem, and they don't offer you a real solution. Because if there was a system out there, and of course there could be, a system that's a divine social system, a divine economy that's based in the will of God, something that would work and would be sustainable and would be fair and would be equitable and would be, just positive and uplift humanity, nobody would accept that. In fact, any system you propose, very few people will accept the change. And when you tell them you're going to have to sacrifice and give things up, they'll immediately say, F you, we're not doing that. And so no new system will be accepted until the old system collapses. And the system can't be fixed, right? And so that's just whatever it is. But going back to this content that we see that they put out there, and that people regurgitate and watch and, whatever they do, it is a reflection of where we are, right? And yeah, it's been manipulated and we've been manipulated, but we've gone along with it. And to such an extent that people's internal worlds are contaminated. Because I was watching this show with my wife, Louder Milk. Now, it was a show where somebody sent me a clip where Louder Milk, the main character, was talking to like a barista at a coffee shop. The show was set in Seattle, which I didn't know at the time. I didn't know what it was. And she was talking like a Kardashian, and he mocked her. And somebody, because I do that here, sent me the clip. And, people started telling me it was this show called Louder Milk, which was free on Amazon Prime. And my wife and I started to watch it. It was probably like a 3-star show. My wife and I watch things. We take naps and we chat. We talk about, whatever. But there were some good, jokes in it. The comedian Brian Regan was there. He's a part of the cast. He's one of the alcoholics. It was about a group of alcoholics. Louder Milk is a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And he's, very kind of rough. They're pretty, old school, what you'd consider toxic masculinity kind of people. And, it was an okay show. Some funny jokes. Sitcoms are a little tough to get through because they do a lot of like unrealistic things to set up bits. If the bits are funny and the bits work, it's okay. But a lot of things are not really, reality based just to make jokes work, right? Situational jokes, situational comedy. And so, I can, if the jokes are funny and, there's at least some laughs involved or whatever. But the show itself, was okay. It was an okay show. But I think it was in it's 3 seasons. I think we were watching the 3rd season. And it started to get more and more preachy. And there was an episode where they went full feminist, right? So, and it was so bad and so heavy-handed. I'm like, well, I don't want to watch this anymore. It was like, I get tired of being preached at. I think most of you feel the same way. And they do it in such a heavy-handed, inauthentic way to make points that are oftentimes wrong in themselves, but even if they were right, it doesn't work. And it's a point of view that we already know about. And so what happened in the episode was 4 of the characters were playing golf. And one of the characters, Louder Milk, hit a female golfer with a putt, and didn't say 4. And she came over and verbally berated them. This is liberal Seattle. And the guy started to, talk to her like with what is considered toxic masculinity. And she whacked one of them over the head with a golf club. And so they go to court, and the woman has to take 8 anger management classes. And then one of the guys says something that's sexist, and the judge makes all 4 of them take a, women's education, whatever they call the thing, right? Sensitivity training. And they show up, and there's a woman hosting, and the guys, are so out clueless and, just whatever they are, right? And Brian Regan, who abandoned his 8 or 9 kids or whatever it is in the show, meets with his daughter who's graduating college, and she's just about to get a job interview. And she goes and has a job interview, and, they meet again a second time, and she didn't take the job because one of her classmates, a boy, just graduated college, was given the same job offer as her, but he was getting paid 25% more just because he was a man, right? In Seattle, in liberal Seattle. And, this whole contrived thing. And Brian Regan says, well, he's a man. He's got, he does all this, the sexist, toxic masculinity stuff. And his daughter lectures him. And then he kind of realizes the error of his ways, which was just painful to watch. And he goes back to the training, and he starts lecturing his 3 wayward toxic masculinity, co-group members. And he says, hey, this is serious. And I'm like, it's supposed to be a sitcom, right? And we all know what their point of view is. And the more you try to force it on us, the more you try to indoctrinate us to it, at least the people who are, have critical thinking skills, the more and more we resist it and want to go the other way. If that's the goal, then they're succeeding because they're not winning people over. And this translates into the truth community as well. And I've discussed this before, but I guess I'll say something new here. Maybe, I don't know. I've made so much content, it's hard to remember everything I've said or covered. But it's this. People are so into their own beliefs and way of looking at things. I got a lot of people who were commenting about Madonna and that she she was involved in human trafficking. It's some, obscure Ethiopian council or something. I don't know what it is or what legitimacy it has or what its intentions are. But I do know that nobody in the truth community gave an F about this group until they went after Madonna um, for sex trafficking. And because Madonna sucks, Madam Expiration Date, because she's so demonic, people immediately think that this is true. And whether she is involved in something like this or not doesn't mean that this is legitimate. But it's this desire within the truth community to believe, and also believe that finally, the Cubies did this, and the pizza people, and most of us who had been around for a while had seen this time and time again, knew that nothing was going to come of it, right? Nothing was going to come of the Jeffrey Epstein thing. Nothing was going to come of any of these things, right? One of my viewers posted a comment to my Alec Baldwin, stuff with Halna Hutchins, and the person said, "Well, what this is about is that she was producing a documentary about sexual abuse, and it wasn't, human trafficking, but it wasn't. It was, completely Hollywood, right?" But I said this a long time ago. That fact that she died isn't going to make that film go away. That film was already set to be released, is going to be released, and her death makes more people are going to see it. And so that's stupid, right? That's just stupid truther stuff. We were like, oh my gosh, she's doing that. That's why they killed her. Yeah, okay, well, that's not logical. I mean, it could be why they killed her, but it's not because, again, it isn't a groundbreaking. Actually, Holly Hutchins wasn't working on one of these films, right? And she wouldn't be doing Alec Ball. It's just stupid. Anne Heche that was working on one of these films, and it's a rumor that Helena Hutchins was working on them. But every time somebody dies, there are people in the truth community that are immediately going to say they must have been doing something. They were going to expose, the whole QB thing. And even if they exposed whatever they exposed, pedophile rings or whatever it is, it wouldn't mean anything. They're not going to prosecute anybody. There might be a scapegoat in certain circumstances. Nobody will listen to them. There was already a great movie called the Open Secret. Is it The Open Secret? It's a documentary about the human trafficking or sexual abuse in Hollywood of young kids, and Amy Berg is the director. It's a well done documentary, and it didn't do anything. They don't have to kill anybody because the internet itself is filled with people who all think they know better, and only the people that believe in you and have believed that something that you're saying agrees with their belief system are going to support you, and nobody has any power to do anything. And so these things are just stupid, right? But this is what I'm talking about in terms of people having this view that they have the answer. And really nobody does, because we're all brought up and raised by a dysfunctional system, right? I could say that I have a partial answer in a sense that, I know people in the future will need to connect to God and embrace their soul's path, because we all see what happens when you embrace your ego's path. But not a religious God, because the religions have all been played and, manipulated, but a real internal connection to God. And I've also experienced that through the Sahaj Marg system, which has been corrupted by the Heartfulness, part of the organization, which I've talked about extensively in the Journey series, which has been a real bummer for me. But the system itself and the, idea of connecting to God internally is at least part of the answer. And the other part of the answer is you're going to have to change the way that your lifestyle is. Our brains have been habituated by our stories, by TV, by electronics, by technology, by electricity itself, and by our pampered way of living. We live better than kings lived in the past, right? Kings didn't have air conditioning and heat, and these ancient kings, they didn't have nearly the kind of comforts and technological advancements we have. And it's made us entitled and weak and all these things, right? And so all those things would have to change. And, having homesteaded a little bit and done some of this on my own, in terms of my, family stuff and on my own, we're doing work outside and, learning some of the, stuff to do with growing food and things like this. I have a little sense of it, not much, not 10% of what I would need or whatever, 15%, I don't know. There's no way to gauge it, but very limited. And, those are the things that people are going to have to do. And right now there isn't enough motivation. The motivation will have to come from necessity, from a system collapsing, and all you have is, you have to survive, so you have to fight and, overcome your own weaknesses, your own poor training, your own indoctrination to the system. And when that starts happening, people will start realizing things. Then you'll get a real dose of reality instead of just sitting back on the internet and trying to, think that you know stuff, right? I mean, you have to change what you're doing. You have to change what's inside of you. And if you're just, if you're the same person expecting the world around you to adopt to your beliefs because you're such a great knower, whether you're a truther or whether you're a woke person or, the whole woke culture or you're just some sheeple, none of that's going to work, right? And everyone has to, the first thing they have to do is understand they're going to have to change because we've been warped and perverted by a perverted and warped system, a demonic system. And, it's just become more and more obvious. And it's been a real problem with the truthers because there's so many just absolutely suck. Now, I'm not talking about the shills and the agent provocateurs, and people working for the government or whatever it is. I'm talking about just ordinary dumbasses that get on the internet and just spout their ignorance. And it's just, it's getting harder and harder to have any real hope and faith for humanity, right? We just have to believe that there's a generation coming and there's a plan. If there isn't, we're effed. We're booped. All right. So I made this voiceover last night, and I forgot one important point, and that's about confirmation bias. And whatever your point of view, whatever your specific belief system is personally, and the group you identify with, the larger group, like, say, truthers, and then subgroups in the truth community, or, sheeple and Democrats and Republicans, all these people, and their subgroups, in your specific view, you can find information that confirms your belief, confirms what you believe in inside yourself, right? You can find information out there. There's so much information that tells you exactly what you want to hear and confirms that you were right all along. That's the big problem. And that just makes people more cemented in their beliefs. They are, constantly being told that they were right because you can find information and people agree with you on the internet. And that's purposeful, right? I said this, years ago. They want more division, more and more division. You see this, even in small subgroups of the truth community, people arguing with each other. There's this Tartarian people now that, they believe things similar to what I believe, but they're like, I'm not one of them, right? It's one of these new subgroups. And I might not have pronounced that right. But somebody sent me a video, and one of these Tartarian people was going on a rant, like a vulgar, the guy was Australian, I think, and he just was going after other Tartarian people. I saw the same thing. People sent me stuff when there was a rift in the flat earth community. This one guy was rapping and dressing up like a woman and mocking other flat earthers, and it was a whole thing. Happened in the Q community, even small subgroups, or you have subgroups of small communities, and people start fighting over small insignificant things, right? That are, details in their belief system. And that's what the powers that be want. They want you divided at the Thanksgiving table over politics and Trump and the vaccine and Biden. And they want, everyone at each other's throats. They want people to isolate themselves and not come together as a community, right? There's an article that I'm going to cover. It's an obscure sort of magazine my wife sent me, and the person writing said that now that the vaccine seems to be having side effects, it's a liberal magazine, why didn't the anti-vaxxers do more to warn us? Right? Like, and it's I'm going to cover that on my other channel today. My Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies series over there on Apocalypse Now. But this is how it is, right? People are looking to blame, finger point, and even in the case of taking no responsibility for the way they acted in the first place. And so this is what they want. They want division across the board. They want people to be divided, and even in small groups, that people are individualistic and isolated, and there's no cohesion, there's no village, there's no community, because you need a community. To have any alternative to this system, you need a community. If you want to have you need a village-based local community. You have to get along with your neighbors, and you got to come together and in your family. I mean, never mind your neighbors, but your family. You have to get along with your family members, and you have to work together collectively to maintain your existence, right? Because there's no national global system supporting you with goods and services. And so as long as you're divided, there's no chance of that. And people have a tough time of working together. Like I was saying about those anarchists and the dollar vigilante, this thing that they're doing there. Well, they have all these people, they have the value of the American dollar, and they have wealth, and they can pay people in Mexico to do their, grow their food and do whatever, right? But when you come together as a community, and I've known some of these intentional communities, one of the famous ones, Twin Oaks, which was based in B.F. Skinner's, some behaviorist model. They have cows and they make hammocks, and they have an epic garden in Virginia. It was where my family and I used to live when we got our first cows, and we bought our cows from them. And so I had interactions with the people over there. They always have 100 people, and everyone comes in equal. They give up their belongings. So when you come into the community, you don't have more money than somebody else. Everyone's on the same level. And the people over there struggle, and and they're doing it right. They grow enough food, and they're able to support themselves. But people come and go all the time because they don't like it, right? It's not as good as being independent and living your own life. And so I've seen very few communities that make it. I don't know of any of them, really. I mean, they make it, but people are unhappy, and because you're trained for something else, and you don't have to do it, right? And people are, they get their feelings hurt, or people don't understand their lack of value as a person, in terms of contributing, and some people have to do more, and there's there is whatever it is. And so local communities, and just even being in a family environment for a long time, and dealing with the conflict and the everyone's been poorly trained to be into something like that. And so when you're going to talk about a solution, the solution is going to come down to being localized and having a family-based tribal type situation. And I know very few people who would thrive in that environment, right? And being an introvert and a loner myself, it's a big deal. So surviving, coming up with a new system that is a system where either go back to the old ways, and that's not really possible. And so coming up with a new system where there's more local interaction and cohesion isn't really possible right now, just because how people are. So you need starving people who are desperate and scared and are highly motivated. Like it's if you've been in a bad relationship and you're getting older and you have like one last chance, right? You meet somebody, you have one last kind of a chance, and you realize the things you got to change that has sabotaged all your other relationships, and you're more gracious, and you're more you have a better opportunity, something like that. You need something like where you've failed in various ways, and you're humbled, and you realize you have to change, or you're going to end up alone. You're going to die alone or something, right? Like this is the kind of situation, and even more severe than that, where people realize that just to survive they have to be better than they are, and be highly motivated and positive, and not be complaining and not be entitled and all these things. And so we're a long way from that. And so right now everyone hates each other, and no one could get along, and people just have confirmation that they're right all the time because they look at the internet and there's somebody telling them they're right, and that's the big problem. And if you go in looking for something, right, like people who are, these pizza people, like people who came in during the pizza, a long time ago, I was talking about this, and one of my commenters said, yeah, the people who came in with a big event in 2001, as opposed to the economic collapse in 2008, and then those, events that happened in elementary schools, those people, and then the people that came in with, pizza and Jeffrey Epstein and, the whole QB thing. And so there's a group of people these are the kind of new group of people that the latest group that has come in, and they're obsessed with, something we all covered, that we all knew about, the Hollywood perversion, the perversion in the government and all these deviant sexual tendencies, right? The pervs and the pedos that are involved in all that stuff. But you have a group of people that think that they have to save the children from these Hollywood predators and from these, Washington, D.C. predators and all these people. And then you hear a story about like Madonna, and you're like, is Madonna on the flight logs for Jeffrey Epstein's island, right? Like it's the first thing people will look for. And those flight logs are made up, many of them. And so they're not even accurate. And so you hear that, you're like, it's confirmation. I know this guy's, it's the whole thing. And they may be, right? But that isn't proof because it's made up stuff. And because the QBs were so batshit crazy, they wrecked it. Like instead of doing solid research and, not saying things were facts when they weren't, and making things up, and then, believing in the great pumpkin is going to rescue you, all these things, and, thinking that something's going to happen, those indictments, the sealed indictments that were there that never, amounted to anything, and the way that the QBs were played out in the media. Now, when you say something like this, that Madonna is, part of some, evil human trafficking pedo ring or something, they can go, you're just one of those QBs. Now they've got cover. You've given them cover. You've given these people cover. You've given them a way to say, you must be one of those crazy QBs, right? You've given them an out. And so they wrecked it. They completely wrecked it in their obsession and their way that they handled it. Lack of integrity, lack of, truth, journalistic integrity, lack of anything. Just going in an emotional frenzy and posting things and making announcements and making accusations without any basis of fact, and then just acting like a fool, right? A group of fools. And now, when people say something like that, which is based in, facts, but you have to have the facts. You have to have, legitimacy. You have to be able to prove something. You have to be able to, you just can't make announcements, like that guy Isaac Cappy that came in and just started saying stuff about Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks with zero proof, just saying it like I know and I can tell you this, and just to have people fawn all over him, right? He was like a needy, desperate person that needed people to sort of, where he was the holding cord and people were listening to him, hanging on his every word because he was, a D-list actor that had connections, right? And so that wrecked the whole thing. You gave these pervs and pedos and people an out, right? You gave them the ability to say, look, you're one of those crazy people that believe this crazy stuff because there was so much crazy there, so much untruth and so much, negative emotion and bad decisions, right? And so this is where someone's biased and believing, when you look for something, like Madonna's story breaks and you immediately assume it's true. And then all these people start making up things, and we're creating all these, false. There was a homeless camp in Arizona, and it was obviously, you could tell by the way that it looked that it was a place where homeless people lived. But somebody, made a story that it was a human trafficking place, and there was a strap. They called it an R strap, and it was a place, that someone would have in a campsite to tie something, to hang something, right? And they had, these various things, and this guy went in. This guy was a desperate guy. He was some guy who was looking for attention. He was somebody who wasn't a veteran, but was always trying to support the veterans in some way. You guys might remember this guy. He was crazy. He lived out there. And he made up all these things, and Alex Jones got involved, and some other people got involved, and then they smelled a rat, and they got out of it. But this guy made up this whole thing. They found a human skull somewhere out in the desert. And they said it was a child's skull when it was obviously an adult's. And, it was just this thing. And they said that there was ties to a Clintons, which there always is for these people. And they just made stuff up. And people ran with it. I remember saying to people, this isn't true. You guys are just making things up. This is obviously a homeless camp. And some woman, wrote a comment, some frenzied QB woman, why are you supporting the pedos, right? And I'm like, come on, just grow up. Like, this is why I call them the QBs. They just made stuff up and did stupid things and attacked anybody who didn't agree with them. And so this is, the modern day internet and why the truth community has been completely compromised and contaminated by morons. And so this is how it's gone down. Like, stupid people got involved and they were emotionally triggered and they're not dealing with their own stuff. And they, just come in and they, the Trumpers and all that stuff. And now there's just all this fake information out there. And information that might be based in some level of truth, but it's been contaminated by all these theories and lenses that people look through their personal lenses. And so now you can never get to the bottom of anything. And there's never going to be, any prosecution, there's not going to be any satisfaction, like Madonna's not going to jail and, all these things, right? Hunter Biden isn't going to jail. Trump is more than likely not going to jail, right? It's just people are never going to be satisfied. It's just a mess, right? A mess of a system where everyone says, oh, that's BS, you're one of these people. And there's no, agreement on reality anymore because the lies are just expanding. The illusion is expanding now. And now there's all these personal subgroups or small subgroups of realities that people view the world as this way. Other groups view it as that way, and there's no way to have any common ground. And people are becoming more and more isolated and alone and, mentally ill, right? Because they're just, whacked. I mean, they're mentally whacked. They've gone down their personal rabbit holes, and they have these defense mechanisms. If you confront their reality and they just either, shut down or they attack you or they accuse you or whatever it is, right? You can't reach them. You can't talk to them. And for me personally, like I had always had the Sahaj Marg system, which was, a reality. It brought you to reality because you're connected to God. There's a book called Reality at Dawn written by the second master Babaji, the system. And the meditation and the cleaning and the, it just gave clarity. People who do it for a while, you just gain clarity. And then the current master of the system just destroyed, like just made a mockery of the whole thing and the people around them. And so the organization, the system still works, but the organization's gone to, I can't even believe it's happening. And I'm doing a big Journey series video now on it, how bad it's gotten. And so it's just everything and everywhere. It's entered into every aspect of human life right now. Like it's the great, deception, and it's people personally deceiving themselves and missing the big picture that we're all effed and we don't come together. If we don't come together on some, on some level, there's no backup plan to this system collapsing, and it's collapsing. And people are, isolated and alone and facing this by themselves. Good place to end. A cheery note. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.